Alright, so after a little bit of a hiatus, take a couple trips back to the 3215. So I got the parts in. I'll show those here in a little bit. So this is the motor right here that I have to take off, and the line runs around back like I showed you in the previous video. But the first thing I have to do, I didn't realize that this thing had this, I have to take the disc brakes off. So I've got the mechanism rod, there you go, that's the word I'm looking for, disconnected, and I think I have to take the whole hub and everything off at the same time, so I may have to get a puller to do that. But I've got the rods disconnected on both sides, so now I'll go ahead and work on pulling the hub off. I'm actually going to use a little bit of a contraption here, 3/4 drive hooked to my 1/2 inch impact, because I don't have a 3/4 impact. Nice thing about when you get into hardware this size, metric versus standard or imperial really doesn't matter too much. I mean, obviously I'd love to have metric, but I haven't ponied up the couple $100s to buy a decent set of larger metric sockets yet. So we're going to use the 1.5 inch, and it's probably I may even have a 27, 28, I don't know. No, it's bigger than that, 32. I don't know what the 1.5 inch, 20, probably be closer to 30, I guess. I'll see if I have a 30, and we'll go from there. So I think I got to pull this hub and these brakes off at the same time, so I got to get this nut in there loosened up, and then I'll come back and take another video of it. To pull this motor off, I have not drained the fluid yet. To pull this motor out, I have to loosen up these 4 bolts, 2 on the top, 2 on the bottom, and then eventually I will drain the fluid out. I do have the machine up at an angle, and so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drain it down a little bit. I don't want to get too much fluid out of it. I'm not really in the mood to buy too much fluid. I'm going to try to keep it clean so I can reuse it, which is not something I normally would recommend. But with 12 gallons at $15 a gallon, that gets a bit expensive. So I really don't want to put $180 in this thing until I know exactly what I'm doing with it. I did get the wheels, the rollers for the front, so I'll get those installed again. Got those from the previous owner. I had forgotten them at the previous spot. Just those 5 rollers was 67 pounds to ship them. So yeah, that was a bit interesting. So I'll work on this and I'll come back and I'll show you my progress. All right, the hub is off. Now, I do want to take just a minute and talk about shop safety, because this is why it's really important to wear your safety glasses and pay attention to what you're doing and realizing you're working with a lot of forces. Now, I knew that this was a tapered hub right here, tapered axle right here. So after I took the nut off, which the nut came off just fine, I used the brass hammer, tapped the hub a couple times, hoping it would come off. It was loaded with some tension or something like that, and it wouldn't come off. So I figured, okay, it's probably rusted on there. I need a little bit of tension on it. So I got out my 2-jaw puller, which is pretty easy. I'll show you the aftermath here in just a second. Got out my 2-jaw puller, put a little bit of tension on it. Not much, just a little bit of tension. Just enough to where I figured if I hit it, it would just pop forward a little bit, and then I could just pull it off. That was not the case. So what I did is I got a little bit of lubricant, penetration oil, sprayed in here, and then I got my torch, my propane torch. It's not an acetylene torch or anything, just a propane torch, MAP torch, whatever. That's just a propane torch. I heated up the hub a little bit with just that little bit of tension. I tapped it about 3 times with the brass hammer, and it ended up over there. That is exactly where it landed. That is probably a good 4 feet. Now, I knew it was going to come off based on just past experiences and thinking about things. I knew it was going to come off with a little bit of force, and there was the potential. When you take a flywheel off an engine, there's always a little pop. I knew there was potential for it to move substantially, so I was actually sitting off to the side. Now, had I been sitting in front of that when that probably, I haven't picked it up yet, it's still sitting over there, that's exactly where it landed. You can see the two brakes ended up, I mean, they're exactly where they sit. But anyway, that is just a message in stop safety, because if I had been sitting in front of it, it probably would have been a very, very painful experience. I mean, probably not too big of an injury, but it would have been painful and left a couple bruises because it came off with some force. Now, we can go over here, let me roll over here on my stool and actually figure out what we did here. Let's see here. So, didn't damage the hub, that's exciting, right? Except where it scraped along the ground. So, hub looks good. We'll get it on there. And that shows you just a little bit of heat can go a decent way. Here are the disc brakes. Oh, I've probably got parts all over for the disc brakes. I'll have to make sure how those go back together. I hate disc brakes. Particularly on machines like this. They're just a little bit of a pain. The hub actually looks really good. Not too much wear on the brakes, so I guess that's good. So next is I will get in here and I'm actually going to drain the fluid a little bit. And then after I drain the fluid, I will go in here and I will pull this motor out. So it's going to take me a little bit. I got to find a clean container to drain the fluid into, clean up around the drain. The drain is actually in the middle of the axle. You can see it there. So I've got to clean up around the drain, figure out, make sure the fluid stays clean, and go from there. I might almost, if I have a long enough suction, I might almost suck it out into a container versus, in fact, I think that's what I'm going to try to do first. I think I have a couple clean suction tubes, so I'll try that first. Maybe that's going to be a little easier and a little cleaner and keep the oil cleaner than trying to drain it out the bottom. So anyway, that's this part, and we'll carry on with the next part.